Right, good evening. We will talk about the basic assessment tonight, and it's quite often referred to as the driving license of beekeeping. And you can look at it like that if you want, or you can look at it as more of an advanced theory driving um, thing, because to keep bees, I think you actually have to know all the bits that are included in the basic. And if you don't know all those bits, you're not going to be very good at keeping bees. So I think you're a bit beyond an absolute beginner, and you should be very confident before you take your basic. The rules say you have to keep bees for 12 months beforehand, and I will just share the syllabus there. It's available on the BBK website, and it's actually a two-sided document which I've printed, and I suggest you all actually print it, because I will explain why when we get to the second side. This bit just explains that you need to have kept bees for 12 months. And I know some of you haven't even got bees yet, but I think actually using the second side of this sheet of paper is actually a really good way of judging where you are in your beekeeping. This bit you can almost ignore the apiary requirements. That's just going to tell you what you need to do when you're actually doing it. And it's basically take very clean kit. And if you want to really impress the person who's examining you, assessing you, then make sure everything in your toolbox is spotless, and have a hive tool cleaning bucket, a bucket for wax, and make sure you've got clean gloves and clean boots.
Hide your leather gloves.
Don't have leather gloves. So anyway,
I said hide them.
That's this bit. I'd rather you didn't have them at all, Graham. So anyway, you've got to have bees for at least 12 months, but this is self-certified. And it breaks down the 4 sections of it there, which are all detailed on the second side. And why I think you should print that is because I think you should print a couple of copies, and you should write January 2021 on the top of one of them, and go through and tick off each thing that you think you understand, that you think you'd be able to do. If you've not got bees, there might be some things you've read about, so you could put an R next to it, or write, I've read about that, or I understand that, and go through it bit by bit. So when it's saying, let's zoom in a bit there, the care needed when handling a colony of bees. Are you aware of how much care is needed? Or do you think it's right to throw things about? The reactions of honeybees to smoke, the personal equipment you need, the reasons for opening a colony, the need for stores, the importance of record keeping. Hopefully, if you've been to more than one of my talk, you will have this one drilled into your heads, the importance of record keeping. The need for stores, as we've just said about, it's for the sake of a fiver, buying your bees some fondant to keep them going is better than losing your colony. And the reasons for opening a colony. This one's really interesting, and I'm going to pick up on something Graham joked about last time, that he could open his bees every day. And somebody quite rightly jumped in and said, no, you do it once a week. You don't do it more often because of the time it takes for the bees to get back into their normal rhythm of bringing in pollen and nectar. Because when you do your inspections, it does disrupt the colony. It stops them doing their normal behaviour. And the more smoke you use, the more disruption there is. And if you think about their reaction to smoke, which is 1.2 there, they fill their honey crops with honey because they think their house is on fire. So if they're going to do that every time you puff smoke, then they're going to gorge themselves on honey. That process in itself takes time, and it then means they've got to put that honey back. Yes, Sue, unmute yourself.
Yeah, can I ask about the smoker? I've seen films where Phil Chandler uses water with a ball of propolis attached to the tube inside the thing, and he sprays them very gently with that, and that he just drives them down. He jokes and says they like women, they don't like the hair wet. Is that kinder or better than smoke?
I don't think knowing where you live near me, the weather's good enough to be doing that to them, because they then have to evaporate that water off. They have to clean it off each other. The smoke will react with their senses and make them eat honey. The water will physically make them cooler. It will give them something to do. It will stop them flying. I've seen it done on swarms to stop the outside layer of sort of taking off. If you think the swarm's in about to fly off, spray it with water. It's not going to go anywhere because it thinks it's raining. But in terms of doing a hive inspection, I think you need to find a really good, cool smoke and get good at using it. And you can practice lighting a smoker with lots of different things and make as much smoke as Graham's making now, or just a very gentle amount of smoke, and putting your hand over the top of a smoker. So you get your smoker, like here's one I made earlier, and if you puff it that fast, can you hear that? Yeah. You are going to make really, really hot smoke, and the bees won't like it at all. It will be horrible for them. But if you get some nice cool smoke, so nothing that burns really hot and intensely, and you make sure it's kept topped up, then it's a nice cool smoke. And most bees you don't actually have to use very much. And generally, my bees, I give them a little smoke at the entrance to let them know I'm going in, and I leave it a minute or two. And then I'll get on with my inspection. And about halfway through, I might decide I want to see what's on a frame, and then I'll pick the smoker up. I don't use water because here in Oldham, the weather's quite often a bit crap. And I just think smoke's really easy and not harmful. I think water would be more disruptive. So go on.
Should you see what mood they're in? I can only go off what I've done at the apiary at the park. Yeah. And the bees are so gentle. Do they need smoke? If you open the hive and they're quite happy with you, do you need smoke? Do you automatically smoke, or do you base whether you smoke or not on their mood?
I always give them some smoke first to let them know I'm going in.
Right.
But most of the time after that, my bees need very little smoke.
Yeah.
If they needed a lot of smoke, it's probably because they're not very nice bees.
Right.
Or the weather's wrong. And quite often, if your bees are a bit tetchy one day and it starts thundering half an hour later after you've gone in the house, you know why they were tetchy.
Yeah.
But I don't use lots of smoke. I know someone who uses absolutely masses of smoke because she hates bees. And it sounds quite insane. She looks after a colony for a friend when he goes on holiday, and she's quite happy to do this, but she doesn't like the idea of bees crawling on her fingers. So when she goes near a lug, she smokes all the bees off it so there's no bees on it. And I think she uses far too much smoke. But the bees don't mind because she uses a cool smoke. If you're using the wrong smoke, it will have an adverse reaction on them. Yeah. And this is why play with the different fuels. And the one I use mostly is chicken bedding, the big flaky sawdust shavings. The shavings it's called. If you ask for sawdust, you get something else at our farm. So it's shavings. So they're big and quite light, and they have lots of air in between them when you put them in your smoker.
Is it packed quite close, quite densely then?
Yeah, once you've got it going, you can pack it in and you can fill your smoker up really well. Or some of the cardboards I've used are quite good, but some of the cardboard can be a bit iffy. And I have just emptied the smoker out into the bucket I carry and gone and lit something else. If I've used a new cardboard and it's not right, I have no problem with emptying the smoker out.
Is it worth trying the cardboard first, just before you even get close to the smoker, just to make sure it burns? Because some cardboards are treated nowadays, aren't they?
Yes, some of them just don't burn. Some of them are absolutely terrible.
Is that my new smoker behind your shoulder, by the way, that you're just pumping?
Your new smoker? I know. Was it that one? The taller one?
I don't know. I remember you ordering too many.
Yeah, that's the taller one. Yeah, that's the taller one. Now, there is a cup here as well.
I've got some of those in my toolbox. Ready.
That was a very nice bottle of champagne, actually, I'll just say.
Did you sniff it? and fall over.
I drank about 2 glasses of that actually, and then fell over, but not off a chair.
Good girl.
So does that answer your question? I don't use smoke, and I understand why some people think water's better than smoke, but I don't see it that way. I see it as more disruptive. But again, if you have to use a lot of water or smoke, you probably need better bees. So, right, so we have sort of covered those. You will be able to, and this is for during the assessment, open a colony of honeybees and keep them under control. Claire.
Hello. Yeah, on the syllabus where it says the candidate will be aware of.
Yeah.
To what degree do you have to demonstrate your awareness?
They will take. I'm not an assessor, so I don't know exactly how they score it, but I'd imagine they give you a point for most of these things. I think they will know from your inspection whether you know about being gentle with the bees. And I suspect if you're actually really smashing frames about, they would actually ask you to stop and maybe show you a better technique. If you've never had anyone show you how to handle frames, they might say, this is a much better way of using your hive tool. Or it might be the hive you get asked to go through is really propolisy and you're not used to that, so you might struggle with that. But when you're doing the practical bit of the assessment, you're asked to talk to them as if they know nothing about bees. So that's when you can say, we've both got clean gloves on, we both have clean bee suits, I have a clean hive tool, I have a bucket to wash it in if I was to go in another hive. I'm going to be very careful and gentle when I go through the hive because I don't want to bang and bump the bees about. So you can use as much description as you want, and if you actually start talking your way through an assessment when you're just doing your hive inspections, you will find it much easier on the day. But then I find it really difficult to talk through for my record keeping what I'm doing because I just get really distracted and I'm just looking at the frames going, oh, that's really pretty, rather than saying, oh, there's no queen cells on that frame at all. But when you've got your assessor there, you want to point out everything to them, including, and you'll sound really stupid to yourself, like, and this is the roof, and this is the crown board, and this is a porter escape, and this stops the bees from flooding up into the roof, but allows them entry back into the hive. And this is a super, and this is quite heavy, so it's got a lot of honey. And this second super is also quite heavy, and I'd probably put a third one on. All the time being really nice and calm and gentle, as you would with your own bees, and being really relaxed about it. If you're a bit nervous, they'll take that into account, if your hands are a bit shaky. But they want you to pass, so they're not going to, stare at you like they're Satan or anything. They'll be really nice.
So I guess you might as well turn around and say, like, if you're explaining what you're doing, and you've missed like maybe a key point, they might, I assume then they turn around and say, oh, can you just explain why you're doing that?
They might say that at the time, or they might say, is there anything important on that frame? And that's for when the queen's got this huge mark on it and she's walking across the frame and you're just so nervous, just sweat dripping in your eyes. And now it is, they expect you to be able to identify the queen. And if she's not marked, it is fairly difficult, but she should be marked in that colony. So you for 1.10, you'll be taking frames out, and as you're taking them out, you'll say there's quite a lot of honey on this. These are workers. Most of the bees are workers. They're all female. This is a drone. He has very big eyes. This is a play cup. There's nothing in it. And comment, if you think those frames are really old and tatty, then by all means say so. If you think they look really clean and new, then, mention that as well. It's a conversation, and they will prompt you if you sort of have a bit of a block about anything.
I think it's nothing to worry about.
No.
They want you to pass. Just be calm. Every day that you keep bees, you will learn something new anyway. So, as Diane says, you don't want to lift out the frame and drop it and run away from the bees. That's a no-no. But
However,
like the time I did mine. Yeah.
Oh, go on, David. Tell us this little tale about when you did yours. I love tales about basics.
The inspector actually was smoking that much that you thought the forest was on fire. He panicked because the bees were quite wicked in one of the hives, and they stung him, and he just started puffing smoke everywhere, and everybody was looking at him and thinking, he is panicked here. So just take your time, be calm, and it's nothing to worry about. You might get stung in the finger, but so what?
I will say I know someone else who got stung on their basic quite badly, as did their assessor. And it was probably one of the longest basics in the world, because actually they had such a lovely conversation about beekeeping and bees and what they were doing, and these grumpy bees, and he talked about what they were going to do to sort the bees out and what he should do to sort them out. And it was such a lovely afternoon for this guy, but his wife had took him in the car and was sat sort of quarter of a mile away thinking, it's only supposed to be about an hour. Why has he been 3 hours? And I also know someone who dropped their queen out of the hive, and they passed as well. So you can do all sorts of really terrible things, but as long as you don't dance on her, I think that's the secret. But you should enjoy this, because it's going to be with someone who loves bees as much as you do, and they will want to try and fine tune your performance. And all the things are, at the end of a year's beekeeping, things you should know about, which is why I say get this printed now, right, January 2021, and go through it. And if you want to scan that in or take a picture of it and email it me, then you can. And the bits you aren't sure about, we can use as the focus for talks for people, because I bet there's things that you've all got in common that you think, oh, I'm not sure how I'd talk about that. So the thing most people will find difficult, because it's not something we do very often, is this taking a sample of workers in a suitable container. And there's lots of ways of doing that. And I'm not really going to dwell on that tonight. I will find some really good links of doing it. But the thing that's generally advised is to take a large matchbox, because you can scoop up quite a lot of bees in that. And you need about 50 or so for some of the disease diagnoses, and you can generally get that if you know a few hints, but that's best watching a video of someone actually doing that. And that's
ideally from the entrance, isn't it?
Yes, because you want older bees, the flyers, because they're more likely to have the disease. If you pick brand new bees, they're not going to have acarine or Nosema really.
See, I learned from the early courses.
Excellent.
How much do they go into the diseases? How much do they expect you to?
We will come on to that. So we will first of all talk about, you need to be able to demonstrate how to shake bees from a comb. And lots of beekeepers have never done that because they're a bit frightened of it, even though we've talked about it and we've said about shaking bees off into the hive, not bouncing them off the top of the frames. Lots of people are just a bit scared of it, because it's something you don't want to do, because what if the queen's on there? What if the queen's on there? But you should have a go at it, because doing a brood disease check is actually a really important part of your beekeeping. And if you're not very confident about it and you're worried about the queen being there, get someone to stand close enough so they can see if the queen's there as well. And if they're in your household bubble, get them in a bee suit and have 2 lots of you looking for the queen. And when she's definitely not on that frame, practice shaking it, but open up a space in the hive by having took a couple of frames out and hold it down and do this shaking into the box. So the level of the box is here and you're shaking down, and that way you're not bouncing all the bees up in the air, because that's even more terrifying when you've suddenly banged 60 bees on the head and they're all going to fly around and look at you now.
So the key is to make a bit of space, say out of the hive, take a few flames out, so you've got a hole to drop them into.
Yeah, you're basically wanting to get them to bounce off the floor, because they're not going to come back up at you then. Whereas if you bounce them right up in the air. Go on, Sue.
Can you shake bees on a top bar?
Not really, because your frames aren't supported with wire, so they're a bit fragile. if you were going to check for brood disease, you probably want to brush them off.
Brush them off. Okay.
If you have a top bar hive, when you apply for your basic, I would write it on there that you keep bees on a top bar hive, and they will do their best to get you assessed on a top bar hive.
Right. Okay.
But it may take, I mean, you might have to go 60 miles to get assessed, because there aren't huge numbers of people who keep them who would want an assessor coming in and a new person doing an assessment. But they would try and accommodate a different hive type. But yes, shaking an unwired frame is really difficult. I don't know of anyone who's ever actually broken a frame shaking it, unless it was actually falling apart. One of the pictures in one of the talks I've done recently shows the bottom bars have come out of a frame when the guy's looking at it. You're not going to be asked to look through a frame that's in a hive in poor condition, and if you were, you would be quite entitled to say, I'm not going to shake this frame because I think it'd fall apart, and that would be good observation and good beekeeping practice, because the very last thing you want is a big bundle of wax at the bottom of the box. One of the other things you are asked to do, which is very practical, is to assemble a brood frame and fit it with wired wax foundation. I don't know what they do about that for a top bar hive keeper. You would have to ask, but you could probably learn how to make a brood frame and fit it with wired wax. And in fact, you probably get volunteered by another beekeeper for making all their brood frames whilst you're practicing. Go on, Sue.
Yeah, I've done all that. Well, I'm learning on nationals.
Yeah.
But my personal preference on my allotment is going to be a top bar. But I'm very tempted to do one of each. I don't know yet. So if I decided to go for this assessment, could I go to where I'm learning to get assessed using nationals, or has it got to be with my hives?
It wouldn't be with your hives. It wouldn't be on hives you've practiced on either. There's some conventions they have about you going somewhere else. So you are not familiar with the hives in the apiary and things. And I don't know whether it's particularly because they think you might know what's inside the hive, because the hive can change in a week. But no, they would expect you to go somewhere else. There have been 2 other people with hands up. Francine.
When you say get other people to practice making frames, and people will thank you, I would not thank anybody, especially a beginner, for making frames. They
have to be very, very supervised. And yeah. I have swapped frames with someone I've given someone a new bees, and they've given me the 6 frames in return.
No, thank you.
And I'm really regretting that, because the frames were not made properly. But when I supervise people, the frames get made properly.
Yes, fair enough. Yeah. But never get frames blind. If they want to swap, get them not unmade frames, but don't trust anybody else. I've seen nails everywhere. I've seen missing nails mostly.
Oh, missing nails, yes. And wax that just slides out because nobody fixed it in. And when you've come to use it and you're in your apiary with this box of frames someone's made you in exchange for a nuke, you feel really hard done to. It's really depressing. Hello, Chris.
And the wavy foundation as well.
Yeah. Go on, Chris.
Hi. I just bought a nail gun today from Screwfix.
Did you?
Yeah, just £40 or something, but it does all in. I've never used it yet. Has anybody else used a nail gun on them?
I know KT has, so I bought one from Lidl in the middle of Lidl aisle. I've not tried it yet though, because all my frames are ready to put the foundation in, so it's just I'm hoping that it works just for that last.
So you've made your frames, you just need the foundation part.
Yeah, I've probably still got 100
I love
frames
my
to go,
nail
but
gun.
I've got enough.
Yeah, Chris, we used a nail gun that we got from Screwfix.
Yeah.
To make ours, we got on really well with it. Just practice first. But I'll send you a message in chat. So
is it really good?
I can carry on. Yeah. I'll send you a message in chat.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Excellent. I've no experience of using a nail gun. I suspect Nick wouldn't let me, or the stig, as Chris calls him.
My main problem with using the hammer and nails was every time I hit a eye in the wood, the nails bent. So I was hoping that the nails wouldn't bend, because
you have to get better at hammering.
No, I just need better kit than thorns.
See, my problem when I started making frames was these nails were no good. These nails just wouldn't go in, and they'd bend, and they'd do all sorts of things. And all it is technique and getting better at doing hammering. I think it should probably be on the curriculum for girls in secondary school to be able to use a hammer. And if that means they all have to do a term of beekeeping, so be it. It wouldn't hurt, would it?
It should be on a curriculum. It should be on a curriculum for boys to do it as well, as it was when I was at school.
It wasn't at my girls' school. We didn't have woodworking or metalwork.
Did you have cooking?
We did water sports.
Did you? we did cooking and needlework, and I can make stuffed eggs to my heart's content, and make a shirt and a skirt. So, but my hammering leaves a lot to be desired, or it did 10 years ago. I am a lot better with a hammer now.
But you married a Nick.
I married a Nick who's really, really even miles better than I'll ever be.
And by the way, you have got much more time than I have. I would have my 10-year-old make my frames up if he'd offer.
So how did you pass your basic? Diane, how did you pass your basic?
I can make frames. Nick doesn't make frames. He makes boxes. He could make a frame, I'm sure, with his eyes closed, but he doesn't do that because that was my job. And the neighbours, luckily, have been beekeepers, because then they know what that noise is on a sunny afternoon. Frantic hammering for half an hour as you make a box of frames up to put the wax in, and go back to the apiary. But yeah, I can make frames. I get quite fast when I've got you get 50 out and you get them done in a couple of hours. And
then you get fingers like that bloke on the Thorns videos. dodgy bashed fingers.
I have learned for both allotmenting and beekeeping, you need your nails short. So these long nails that I've got at the moment aren't really long, but they are too long for doing hammering and things. So anyway, the practical side of it, you will really, really enjoy. It will be a really fun sort of 20 minutes, half an hour. They're not going to expect you to inspect the hive all the way through unless you're having such a good time. You say, oh, please, can I finish it? They'll probably get about halfway through watching you and go, you can shut it up now, because that closing up of the hive, being nice and gentle still, is really, really important. And they'll ask you questions as you're doing that about, so how are the frames spaced in the brood box and the super, and, what sort of foundation do you use? And if there weren't ends on or Hoffman frames, what else could you do to space the combs right? And that's something you could talk about when you're opening the hive up or closing it down. And if they want to ask you, they will. And it'll all be very gentle, and they don't shine a light in your eye. They're all really lovely people. And then once you've took your gloves off, because the hive's been safely put back together, you get onto section 2, which is natural history and beekeeping questions. And this is when they're going to ask you the questions about the development of the queen, worker and drones, and the amount of time in each of the stages. And that's the bit you might need to revise about, or at least be able to work out that, when they're all capped, they're all eggs for 3 days, when they emerge as adults, so you can actually work it out. And if you have to work it out by explaining to them, they're all an egg for 3 days. Queen, worker, drone is 8, 9, 10, and then the days are 16, 21, 24. If they're not difficult numbers, and you will know most of that just from having listened to me talk. But the one question they're going to ask you that you might not know if it's somewhere in a different area to where you are. I did my basic over in Ormskirk, and it was in August, and in August Ormskirk's season is finished. They don't have any Himalayan balsam. There's very little ivy in the area. They are quite agricultural, but very few of the crops have pollen or nectar for the bees at that time of year. So their season's effectively coming to an end at the end of August, really abruptly. And so you need to think about what plants might be in the area. And if you're not sure what's in your area, then go for a nice walk at the moment and see if there's catkin trees out. If you've got a river not far from you, there's almost certainly going to be willow. Have a read up on in either the Haynes Bee Manual or the BBKA book. And let me just share a different bit of my screen.
I think one of the good things you said in an early talk, Dan, was on your way to the assessment, look at, see what's in flower and what the bees might. So you might be saying, oh, there's some hawthorn over there. So they might be going over to some hawthorn, or they might be going over to the cherry trees, or.
Yeah. And if you're into gardening, which quite a lot of beekeepers are, then you'll sort of know that. There's stuff in these books that will help you. It will be in the beekeeping year, I think, in this one, which is 156. But this is a really good book if you don't like reading a lot, because it's got so many pictures in. It is really easy to understand because there's not huge chunks of words. So this one's really good. Or this is an edition 1 and you actually need the second edition, which is the newer one. This is the BBKA one. But both of these have everything in that you need to pass your basics. So all of the information on that sheet, all of these bits are covered in both of these books. And I know that because I've gone through both of them and I've ticked off every point on the syllabus for both, because I wanted, before I said that's the book you should have, I wanted to double check. And my first edition is actually lacking a couple of points. So even if you can get a cheap version of this first edition, don't go for the one with the yellowy colour, the yellowy orange colour cover, because that's got everything in. This one's got 2 things missing. And whilst I'm not going to throw it away because it's a really good book, it isn't as good as the second edition, which is presumably why they did one. But that is, I think, a bit more wordy. There's a lot more text on the page there than the Haynes Bee Manual. So it does depend what sort of bookworm you are. If you like books a lot, then get both. And if you don't like reading that much, the Haynes one is just the easier one to go for. But they are both quite good as references for your basic and for most of your beekeeping. But what I would suggest is you really do go through this list and tick off the things you know. So let me go back to sharing the syllabus there. So the other questions they're going to ask are about how the bees collect nectar and how they bring it back and how it's converted to honey, what they use pollen and water in propolis for, and then how they go through the winter. And none of that should be difficult to do. They're not expecting you to use long words. They're expecting you probably to wave your arms about and maybe talk about it in fairly simple terms. They don't want chemical equations for that. You don't need to know any of the Latin names for anything, for any of it. If you do, then show off and say, oh, I know various things in Latin, and especially if you're going to show off with the local flowers and things and give Latin names, then you'll get an extra point, I think, for that. So the second half of that, we can not go too far there, it's talking about how to set up an apiary. And this is things that they might say, how would you improve this apiary? And it might be, you could say, I don't think I'd do a lot, or I'd maybe have a fence up here to stop people walking in front of the hives. And that's just looking at all the things we've talked about having a good position, that it's safe for humans and safe for everyone else in the area, and safe for the bees and provides lots of food. And how you stop them being a nuisance. Talking about the effect of honeybee stings, you might be fortunate enough to discuss that by pointing at the sting on your hand that you've got and say, this is a very minor reaction and I just put some sting stuff on it and it'll be absolutely fine. Or this reaction's swelling up my arm and I'd like you to ring me an ambulance now, thank you very much. We hope you never get allergic to bees, but unfortunately lots of beekeepers do. A quarter of the people on the general husbandry course I went on had EpiPens because of allergies, which I think is a horrendous number. but it shows how addictive the hobby is, that people get very allergic and still don't want to give up.
Did they actually have an allergy, or were they just paranoid?
No, you don't. In this country, you do not get an EpiPen for fun. You have to have a shown allergy.
Sorry, I disagree. I have carried EpiPens, although I am not violently allergic. Your doctor will prescribe them as a precaution.
Really? Because you can't get them even if you've got a life-threatening anaphylaxis to real things. You can't get them.
I'm very surprised at that, Francine.
Yeah. Well, I went to my GP and explained that I've had, big reactions, hives and, swollen lips and all that. Although I emphasized it wasn't an anaphylactic shock. It was just a strong reaction. Said, you better carry EpiPen, safer.
I would suspect you are actually quite allergic to have swollen lips and hives. That's beyond a normal reaction.
About 2 years ago, it's not happened again. It was a one-off.
I will correct myself. You cannot normally get an EpiPen without having a large anaphylactic shock causing concern. I know someone who had a very bad swelling in his foot because of a bee sting, and he twisted his doctor's arm to get one. And I suspect it wasn't a bad response at all. I suspect he was just very concerned because his foot swelled up. But at the same time, I've seen people who've had 20 stings in the back of their hand, and their hands up feel like they're bursting because there's just so much poison in, and that isn't a bad reaction. That's a very normal reaction for that amount of sting. Wow. Yes, Sue.
Just a funny story. I used to have a hairdressing salon, and a lady came in one day. She was a doctor. We didn't know she was a doctor. And she said, I want to speak to all the staff, please. And she gathered everybody around, very official, and banged this injection on the counter. She said, I'm allergic to bees, and if I'm stung by a bee, I need you to inject me with this, otherwise I will die. And she showed everybody how to do this injection and said, right, I'd like a cut and blow, please. It was the quickest hairdo we've ever done. She was in and out within like 15 minutes, and she came for years, and every time she came, she put this injection down. Nothing ever happened, but it was just, the way that she just came in and gathered all the staff around and showed us how to do this injection. But she said that if she was stung, she'd be dead within 20 minutes.
You shouldn't keep all those beehives in the hair salon.
It'd be that beehive haircut. That'll be what it is.
Though, it's more likely as you age and the more times that you have a bad response that you will actually eventually develop anaphylaxis. It is actually a thing.
And your family can, even if they don't come out into the garden with you when you beekeep, because of the washing machine getting venom from stings. That's supposed to be a route to anaphylaxis. I know a bee farmer's wife who's allergic, and she never goes near them, but she does all the washing, and she wears clothes that have been in the washing machine after his stuff.
I only had one sting and ended up in hospital.
Oh dear.
And ended up with throat closing, red from head to toe, couldn't speak, and ended up on steroids and all sorts of drips just from one sting.
Wow. And you still
I carry two EpiPens. I carry two EpiPens. I've got a new suit from New Zealand that's slightly thicker than the actual stinger. So the stinger doesn't go through the material anymore.
My jumper's thicker. So the problem is you get really warm if you wear a jumper under your bee suit.
This is like, I don't know how it can be thicker, but it's like mesh.
Yeah, I've seen them.
It's from the, so that I suppose they wear them in Australia so they don't get hot. Yes.
I think it's called.
Wow.
And the veil sits away from your face and everything, so it's brilliant.
If you're concerned about getting stung on your face, whether it's because you have an allergic reaction or not, is to wear a baseball cap. And the problem with that, again, it makes the top of your head very hot because you've got a cap on and a hood. So what you need is like one of those tennis visors that is just the shade bit and then the top of your hair.
Yeah.
And the other way around it is, as soon as you're going to go and do your beads, you go and wash your hair, and then you go out with wet hair, you tie it all back, you put your bee suit on, you have a cap under that, and your hair will be dry by the time you've finished your bee inspection. It will need combing and brushing and hairspray to make it look normal again, but you will stay cooler during your inspection.
And then the bees come after you.
Don't use apple blossom shampoo is my big hint there, because they love it.
I'm actually on immunotherapy.
Right.
I go once a month to Preston and get a jab. I'm on 2 bee stings now. So
excellent. But yes, it can be very dangerous if you have a bad reaction, and we shouldn't joke. When you get given EpiPens, you should have 2 at all times, because you have to have a second dose if needed. And we had someone come to our training apiary who had an EpiPen, and he bought his trainer pen. And so we looked at that and we played with that. So we were confident about that. The issue being he had legs like matchsticks and there was no flesh in them. And it's like, how on earth do you jab someone in the leg when they've got no fat on them at all? For me, it'd be no problem whatsoever. You take your pick where you stick it. But the thin legs, it's like, but we did say we would ring 999 the minute he got stung because of his allergic response, and take instructions from them whilst waiting for the ambulance. And if the person on the phone said, give him an EpiPen, we would do what they said. But we weren't just going to administer it straight away. We would, the minute he got stung, and luckily he never did.
You have to make sure you haven't got your pen, your phone in your pocket or your wallet, because then it gets in the way.
Yeah. Go on, do you want to come in again, Sue? Right, lower your hand there. So you will also get asked about the process of extracting honey from combs, and a method for a small scale beekeeper, and asked about the hygiene. And this sounds very technical, but basically they want to know, have you got any honey yet? Have you helped another beekeeper get honey? Have you seen it done? Are you looking forward to a honey crop? And if you've only kept bees for 12 months, you might not have got any honey, but you might have read about it or watched a video or been invited to help someone else do their honey crop in a normal year. And this might be difficult this year. The next bit is possibly the most complicated bit, because you have to talk about queenlessness and how you would test for it. And that's the bit that quite often trips people up, as well as giving an elementary description of swarming in a honeybee colony. And that was what we talked about the other week, and what we will continue to talk about. Even when spring gets here, we will go on about that, at least probably once every 3 talks, I think, once we get nearer spring. Because this is probably the most important bit. Yeah, it's all very well known what a drone looks like, but if you can't take that information and control the swarming in your colony, you stop being a beekeeper and you are a bee loser, or a bee fetcher, or a bee watching flying away in a big cloud. So we want to be able to get through this. So I'm going to cover this one absolutely loads.
Where it says explain how you would take a swarm and hive it, what if you're not interested in getting a swarm?
You will be asked how you would do it.
But what if I don't want to do it? What if I don't want to get a swarm?
What if your bees swarm?
If my bees swarm?
Yeah.
You've got to deal with it the same way as if...
You can't just leave your bees to go fly in a chimney.
You have to be prepared, I think.
And it is as simple as, well, I would get a cardboard box and I'd shake them into it and I'd put them on the floor and wrap them up at dusk and get another beekeeper to take them away, because I only want one colony, which is actually what I've heard someone say. I only ever want one hive, they said. And they hadn't got bees at that point. And I suspect as soon as they had got bees, they went, oh my God, why on earth did I say I only want one colony? I actually want 10. But you have to know how to collect a swarm. And when I went on the swarm list a few years ago, someone from Stretford rang me up and he said, I don't need you to come and collect bees. He said, but I'm a beekeeper and I've never collected a swarm and this is what it looks like. What do I do? And he said, thank you very much. When I explained the process, he said, I just wanted to have someone else confirm what I thought. So if he'd done his basic, he'd have already known that, or if he'd have been preparing for his basic. And if you're on an allotment, they might well include, as one of the conditions that you're working towards this, And I think that in that case, the swarm control and the swarm collection is actually really, really important.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. You don't want to leave bees in a public place to be a nuisance, because then people hate bees. And that's never good for any of us. So that's that bit, but we will cover that so many times you will be sick of it, but you will be able to dream about doing swarm control because you'll be so good at it. Diseases and pests. Lots of people think this is the really difficult bit, but I actually think the swarming is probably the difficult bit to be able to describe. One of the hints I will give you for that actually is Thorns, I think it is, do a small model hive. And one of the local assessors said to me, he said the best thing someone ever did was they took this model hive out of their pocket and they had a little model queen and they showed how they would do swarm control using these little model hives. And I thought that was brilliant. I hadn't done that for mine.
So is it just being competent in one of the swarm prevention methods?
Yes.
So if you choose Pagden, that's the one that you kind of explain.
Yes.
But if you choose Snellgrove or not, the stacking them up above.
The Snellgrove, yeah.
So
just be good at one
of the methods.
And be able to talk about it, to explain that you do know what you're talking about. And it can be, well, I'd make up a Queen Right Nuke and explain how you do that, or the Snellgrove, or the Pagden with the head on, or a Taranov, or any of the other ones. Whatever you pick to talk about, because you could say, I've used lots of different methods because I've got 6 hives and I've had them for 3 years before I've decided to do my basics. So I've tried lots of them. The one I found worked best was the Snellgrove, and this is how I do a Snellgrove, or whatever you want to actually talk about.
If you pull notes out of a flip chart behind your kind of bee records, does that hurt? Just say, oh, well, I've kind of got these just as a backup, just to make sure I've got it in the right.
I think they'd want you to be able to describe it, and even if you have to sort of mentally be doing it in your head, then they'd want you to be able to explain it without getting it out.
Notes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
But
I've got the notes anyway.
That's the thing. That's possibly.
On the back of your arm.
What is it? Steve's bee patch. You could have it on a bee patch and they wouldn't be able to make you take your suit off, would they?
But that's a really good one for the number of days for gestation and all the rest of it.
But they're not hard, and we you know, I can do quizzes at some point if you want me to put you all on the spot and say how many days is everything an egg for. You know,
I think it's worthwhile, to be honest.
Right, so the diseases in pests. This one is actually relatively easy. Because you need to be able to describe what good brood looks like, and you'll know what that looks like because that's what you look at every time you go in your hive. And you need to know about why we have good hygiene and why we want to regularly change brood combs. And then the difficult bit maybe is working out the difference between American foul brood and European foul brood. And until you work out after and early and get that right in your head, then does anyone want to come in and say what the after is for in America to help you remember?
AFB's after it's been capped, and EFB's before it's capped,
which is early. And that's the way to remember that. So you know by considering the state of what you will be looking at. AFB, you will be looking for sunken cappings. That will be the sunken, greasy, wet looking cappings, and EFB will be dodgy looking larvae. Chalk brood you might well have all seen. You're very unlikely, I think, to have seen any sack brood, but it looks like a sack slipper with a pointy tail, and it's basically a bag of watery larvae. And then you need to know about monitoring and detecting for varroa, and describe what effects it can have on the colony, and just say that there are viruses relating to high levels of infestation that can really damage the colony, and that's about that. If you know,
it says methods. How many different methods would you do, or again would you talk about
how many methods? How many methods do you know? Let's put you on the spot. Go on. How many methods for detecting and monitoring the presence of varroa, rather, that you can name?
probably 3.
Right, well, go on, quickly.
You're putting
On the
me on.
spot. I've got a countdown clock somewhere. Da-da-da-da-da-da.
Come on, guys, help me out. Okay,
I've got to say, Diane does a really good course on passing the basics, passing the basics, which I highly recommend because we did it last summer. It covers all of these bits.
And you have remembered so much, Mike. I am well impressed. Yeah.
Go on, have a bash.
No,
Go on, Mark.
Me? How would you? Well, first off, you could do the count on the board underneath to see what's falling. You could take a sample of bees and do an alcohol test wash. You could do a carbon dioxide wash. You could do a sugar roll. That's 4.
And there's one really obvious one that you don't need anything other than an uncapping fork for.
Oh, and just look at the drone brood.
Yeah, some drone brood uncapping.
Okay, back to my original question. How many of those would you need to say, or do you go through all of those you can think of?
If you know 4 or 5, tell them 4 or 5. They'll stop you if you go on for too long. And it might be your basic takes 2 hours because you were gabbing so much, but they won't mind. It's think of it as a conversation, not someone shining a light at you. So they might say, so how do you monitor for Varroa levels? And you might say, oh, well, I put the Varroa board in 4 times a year. And then they might say, and are there any other ways you know about? And you might think, oh, I don't know what you're saying now. And they might say, is there anything you could do in the middle of summer, perhaps, when there's a lot of drone brood? And they are leading you to the question. They want you to be aware of these things. So they will nudge you a bit, I think, if you're not getting it. Then they might not nudge you quite that much. Right. Cheerio. Is it David who's going? I can't see the name on the...
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's me.
Right.
I'll do it another meeting. Thanks, bye.
Right. Good night, David. Right. So we've talked about the Varroa thing. I mean, if you know loads about Varroa, then tell them loads about how you monitor Varroa. If you've got one of these fancy carbon dioxide things, you could take it, say, I can show you this gadget if you want. And they might say, no, it's all right, thank you very much. Or they might say, well, let's have a cup of tea and you can tell me all about that. And they want you to be aware of acarine and nosema and what effects they can have on the colony. And as there are no treatments for either of those, there's not so much discussion about what you do when you know they've got it, just that they can kill your colony or they can weaken it to the point where it's almost useless.
Does it help to know what treatments to use for Varroa as well, Diane? I can't see it in that list, but obviously if you kind of say what you'd use in autumn and spring and winter and things, would that help?
I would assume that would come under that controlling Varroa.
I can see it now.
So you might say, in the summer I'd do a drone brood call, and in autumn I'd use Apiguard, which has got thymol in it, smells a lot, and in overwinter I'd do the Apibioxol, or whatever you use. Or you might like to say, these are the methods I'm aware of, but actually I'm a no treatment beekeeper and have been for 10 years. If that's what you want to say, if you don't believe in treating your bees, then by all means say, I know what the treatments are, because you've volunteered to take this assessment. So you have to play the game of it and say, I understand all the different treatments available. But this
is what I do.
This is what I do something different because I don't treat, but I am aware of the things, and show you're up to date with it as well. Cool. And to be aware of the current legislation regarding notifiable diseases and pests of honeybees. And that's basically saying, I'm registered on BeeBase. I know if I've got a problem, I ask the bee inspector to come round, and I know they should be allowed in and look at my hives if they so wish.
And Asian hornets, I guess.
Yes, exactly. That's something, especially if you live down south where there have been sightings. You could say, actually, my apiary is a sentinel apiary, or we put Asian hornet traps up and they're listed on our BeeBase entry. And then that's sort of the second bit as well. Who do you contact? You could say, my bee inspector is Mark, whatever his name is, and and I've got his phone number in my phone in case I'm ever in the apiary and I want to ring him to say this is what I can see and send him a picture. And as long as you're aware of bee-base and you're registered on it, I think that's such an important thing for beekeepers to do. You've got no excuse really not to register on bee-base, and you certainly have no excuse not to comply with the law, even if you don't register on bee-base. If you've got foul brood, for God's sake, ring the bee inspector. And then to know how combs should be stored to prevent wax moth damage, and how to exclude other pests from the hives in winter, which is mouse guards and woodpeckers. And you might not have any experience of woodpeckers, so you're talking about a theoretical knowledge, which you'll have seen in one of my talks at least twice, I think, that cage around them. So the only complicated bit in there is if you decide you want to be a right smarty pants and learn the Latin names. But you can do that on the way there, have someone reading them to you in the car, or just have a bit of paper just before you go in and go, I'm going to remember that. And whether you do or not, it doesn't matter. But it's an extra point, I think, if you do. Yes, Sue?
Does anybody have any problems with woodpeckers? It's just last year on the allotment, we've got woodpeckers and they literally destroyed my birdhouse. It was awful, and I kept putting all these things around it, and it just went in through the side, it went in through the roof, and it also attacked quite a few other birdhouses and got the birds and everything. So could it be that we've just got aggressive woodpeckers in the area, or do you think the hive will be all right?
I suspect you will need, as a precautionary measure, and I'm going to share the pictures here. If you look up a woodpecker cage for a beehive, you will see they use chicken mesh wire,
right,
in different forms, because you need to have enough gap between. If this is the hive, you need to put something over it so that the distance between the wire outside and the hive is longer than the beak.
Yes.
And it's like this super bee suit the lady's got. Stop getting stung. There's got to be enough room. If you just wrap it tightly in wire, they'll just come right up to it and peck you through. So if you know you have that as an issue, then I would get these in place in the autumn, and you can do them really nicely with sticks across the top, so you can actually cage the wire with clips so it's held together, but two people can lift it off. So if you want to heft your hive, you're not hefting it with wire round, but always put it back on. And even if you do that, I'd still go and look at them every week, because you don't want it to have blown to one side, and then if something's happened and it's not where it should be, and the woodpeckers can still damage your hives, they will.
Right. So because we've got a problem, you're saying it could be prevention rather than wait until something happens.
Yes. If you know you've got woodpeckers, we can hear one out on our allotment, but I've never seen it, and all the hives are all right. But the minute they're not, I've got chicken wire ready to go. The minute I see any damage.
Yeah.
But we've had no damage to anything else on the allotment.
Someone I know made just like cages that they just lift on and they keep just for winter, and they've just made them, I think they're dead strong sounding at the tops and the corners, and it just covers everything but around them.
Yeah, there is a waterproof cover. You can get a dark one that's supposed to have some insulation in as well, and I think that'd keep the woodpeckers away, but it has to cover all of it. You don't want to leave the bottom half of your brood box exposed and come back in January and find a big hole where the woodpeckers have spent December digging through. Mark? Unmute.
Yeah. Woodpeckers will teach their young. So if you've got woodpeckers in your area, the young will learn off the parents. This is one problem. And we do the wooden frame over the top. And I've got 4 long canes for each hive just to make sure the corners are tight to keep it away from the sides. And I just curl the bit up at the front so they get in under the front for the bees to enter. So yeah, we, like you had the pictures there, nice big wire cage, 3 or 4 inches away from the side, 4 canes dug into the ground so that they can't slide in at the base, and it holds the wire nice. They slide off when I put them to one side to heft and slide them back on again.
Yeah, that's
yeah. They will teach their young. That's why if you've got bad woodpeckers, that's what's happened.
Yeah. It's like in the 70s, was it? Blue tits simultaneously across the country discovered how to get the cream out of milk bottles, and it wasn't one lot taught the next lot who taught the next lot in the next town. It was across the whole country, and it's like there's this you know, I reckon woodpeckers discovered it universally. All those square boxes they're keeping the bees in now. That's where the dinner is.
I did buy a bunch of second-hand boxes, and one of them came with bits of ply on them, and I wondered what it was until I got my hands on it and pulled the old ply off. There were holes all over it. Whoever it was had a really bad woodpecker attack, and they patched it up and filled it with glue and sawdust and all sorts. Bees didn't mind.
No, but they will if they're in there whilst they're being pecked and gobbled up.
I can imagine that might have been why he gave up.
Yes, it might have been. And I think that's one of the things, isn't it? If you have grumpy bees, if you have a really rubbish apiary and get loads of complaints off your neighbours, or your bees just can't forage, or the woodpeckers come and eat them, or the badgers knock them over, then by the end of your first 12 months of beekeeping, you will be so disillusioned you will give up. And it's so much better if you get support from beekeepers who can make sure you have nice bees, and you can go and see their bees and see how nice bees can be. Because one of the people I know who kept bees all on his own for a long time, he thought it was really normal to get stung a lot. And it's like, no, it isn't. It's really not normal at all. You need a new queen rate. Which obviously, if you know other beekeepers, you can get that sorted out as a problem much quicker. So anyway, tonight was talking all about the basic. There is no rush to apply for the basic, because you can apply up till a month before the last date for it. But normally I'd apply in sort of April, and by April we'll have more idea of what's going on with COVID and whether assessments will actually take place.
Sorry.
Go on.
Diane, Eddie, you're recording it. Are you going to put it somewhere so we can watch it again?
Yes. They go on my YouTube when I've remembered to record them and upload them.
Oh, you got YouTube. You got YouTube sites.
Oh yeah. They're all in a they're in 2 lists now. I've started putting this year's in a second playlist. All the ones from last year that I've put online are in a playlist. And I have occasionally put the link in on comments on my Facebook page. So if you've missed it, it's just because I don't post it absolutely everywhere.
Yeah, there was only one thing wrong with today's presentation. I fell asleep.
Have I not been talking loudly enough?
Could you make it a bit more exciting on Sunday, please? Because I've just fallen asleep for half an hour of it.
I started to do a talk. I have had a really busy day, so I started to do a talk about 4 o'clock, and then had another phone call to deal with, and then had something else to do. And I started again and came down for my tea, and I thought, I'm going to leave that, because I'm just going to not make a really good effort on the talk I planned. So I can always talk about, you know, anything. I pulled a few books off, and it's like, I think doing your own assessment of your skills at the moment is probably the best way to start planning your beekeeping year. So your homework for tonight, and I'm not going to say whether you accept it or not, this is your homework for tonight, is to print this out, or if you want it in a text file, I've probably got it in a text file, or you can cut it out of the PDF off the website yourself, and go through it and sit there dead honest with yourself. Do I know about the care needed? Do I know about extracting honey? And do I know about swarm control? Do I know about apiary hygiene? Just go all the way through it and use a big red pen and tick off the things you know. Send it to me if you want, you don't have to. And then in 3 months' time, when you've listened to some more things, you've maybe got in and done your first inspection this year, or you've watched an inspection, just go back and say, oh, I actually feel a bit more confident about that one. So put 2 ticks by that one.
Yeah.
And then sort of by June, if this is your first year, assess yourself again. Think, what am I weak on? What do I need to brush up on? What didn't I do very well in that inspection? And constantly think about how you can be a better beekeeper. And if you come up with an idea and say, Diane, I really want to know about extracting honey. Have you extracted your honey yet?
No.
Then can we do a talk about that? That's the sort of feedback that, you know, I've put a talk together about that. I might even have photos from my own extraction by then.
I've got to say, Diane, you did a really good 4 or 5 week course on a lot of this that was really useful for me and Katie and a few other people last summer. And I know I've got all my notes from last summer ready for this year. And it'd be worthwhile, anybody, if you want to run it again. Obviously, I'm not trying to make you do something, but
no, I did actually have the PDF open, and I was going to go through that, and I thought I'll just talk about the syllabus because
it was a brilliant 4 or 5 weeks. I'd recommend it to anyone.
So would you all
Diane,
be?
I was going to be controversial. Now Eddie's upset you. I'm not sure I should.
Eddie's not upset me. You'll have to go a long way to upset me. You could tell me you stamp on bees. That'd do it. But go on.
No, what I was saying, I can understand the self-assessment, so you can see kind of what you need to do your own homework with and watch YouTube and things like that. But what is the advantage with actually doing the test?
You get a badge for your bee suit and a certificate. And if you keep bees on an allotment, you will have ticked off usually one of the things.
Yeah, but
on
if you don't and you beekeep alone, nobody's going to see your badge. There's nobody else at the apiary with you.
Have you got children or grandchildren?
It's going to be a confidence thing as well, isn't it? Surely.
Yeah. Have you got children or grandchildren who are at school? There is nothing better than saying to them, I took a test and I passed it, and look at that, I've got a certificate. Look at my badge, and the chances are they're going to
care.
I've got to say, everything I learned from Diane last summer when I did the kind of basics course with Diane has got me through this year. I mean, it's been amazing how much I learned just over and above the basics. I can't thank Diane enough, to be honest.
Oh, thank you.
Same here. It's been so helpful because through lockdown,
I've got 2 colonies still alive, so I think they're thanking as well.
Yeah, same here, Diane. Don't know what we would have done without you.
Oh, thank you. But the reason to do it is because you can. And if you don't want to do it, you don't have to. And if you only keep bees in your garden, you really don't have to. But I think your grandkids or kids would be dead proud of you having got a badge. I mean, if they're ever in the Scouts or Brownies, if you've never been forced to sew badges on, you don't know the joy of having those badges. You could sew it on their brownie suit, make them go to Brownies with a beekeeping badge on, get them in trouble. I think it assesses where you've got to, and I think it might encourage you then to think, I'd like to know more about pests and diseases because it is really interesting.
One of the things I found is that I'm looking for an out apiary. And around here, a lot of the out apiaries are stately homes and places. So they all want you to have a basics covered first. And obviously, just in the normal garden, you don't need that. But expanding anywhere else, even an allotment, you need that.
And if you're in your own garden, there's 2 people with their hands up. I'm not ignoring it in a minute. If you're in your own garden and your neighbours suddenly decide they don't like your beekeeping, then what you can do when environmental health come round is say, I only have 2 hives, they're not a nuisance, I actually have a basic certificate, would you like to see my badge? And at that point, the guys will glaze over and they'll go away quite happy because you've shown them you have a level of competency in beekeeping that's recognised by a national organisation. But don't feel obliged to do it. Do it because you want to do it. But think of it as a really good day out with beekeepers. You get a chance to spend a couple of hours with someone who, I did mine with the vice chair of the BBKA, all those years ago, whatever year it was. And it was such an exciting thing to meet her. Because, she's in the BBKA news. And it was like, oh my God, Margaret Murden, she's amazing. She's doing a talk for children over Easter half term. Now, Sue, we'll come to Sue.
You've covered actually. I was going to say, surely it's not about the badge. It's about showing that you're a responsible beekeeper, isn't it? That you are making yourself learn all these things, which is so important.
And a community as well, I think.
Yeah, of course, because my bees are going to go by allotment, and I think they would expect me to do this. I would want to do it just to make sure that I'm doing it right, because I'm feeling that I would feel responsible for my bees.
Yeah, well, you would be responsible for them,
Yes,
right?
Yeah,
Chris, you've been waiting as well. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I just want to say that at the very beginning, I told you, Diane, that I wasn't interested in all these modules and exams and all this business. I really wasn't bothered in them. I just wanted to look after bees.
Yeah.
But what I've been doing since, the only thing I've been doing really apart from YouTube is being with you, going through your syllabus and your webinars, etc. And I'm looking at this basic course now, and I probably could do that without even thinking about it now, because of what you've taught me. It's all about learning what it's all about, isn't it? Really, looking after your own bees. That's all it is. The courses are made easy after that once you know.
And it's not an exam; it is called an assessment. And I think the word exam puts people off because they remember school. And I really enjoyed school, and I will say I'm a little bit sad maybe because I really like exams, because I used to be a lot better at remembering things than I am now. But I like exams because it's a chance to show off what you've learned and get it all out on paper. And the practical assessment bit is just like that. And the rest of it is just questions, as in a conversation. It's not scary, and they are nice people. And you'll probably be sat there with a cup of tea, and they're not going to ask you to necessarily make your frame. They might just say, point where the nails go. Because if you're the sixth person they've examined today, they don't actually want to watch you nail some nails together.
Can I make the nail gun?
Very possibly. You might not get a plug to plug it in though, if it needs plugging in. But it's something. If you know you can make frames, that bit's not scary. If you know about the basics of how to count whether you've got grower or not, you've got that bit sorted. If you can remember the early and the after bit, you've got the foul brood bit sorted. None of it's actually difficult, and once you've kept bees for 2 years, you should know everything on there, just because you've got a good awareness of being a beekeeper. And you might be a bit rubbishy at the diseasey bit, but that's sort of half an hour reading in one of these. It's not excessive. I always say, get one of these and read it twice, because the first time you read it, you'll be going, oh, that's interesting. And then the second time you'll be going through and going, oh, now that's interesting, because you'll have read the bits after the first bit that made you go, oh, that's good. But yeah, a little bit of reading will make you a better beekeeper. But doing the assessment of you self-assessing, if you don't need to take the basic because you're not on an allotment, then just self-assess yourself. And at the end of 2 years, if there's a bit you're not sure about, then by all means come and give me a nudge and say, you don't mind going through that one evening. You can send me a private message. You don't have to come on the group and go, I can't remember how to do swarm control and my bees keep swarming. Just send me a message and I won't name and shame you.
But to reiterate what Mike said, you've been brilliant all this year and you've taught us everything.
Oh, thank you.
Fabulous.
I've enjoyed it so much too. So that was all about the basic tonight. I am hoping to have a hive autopsy talk done for, what are we on? I don't know what day we're on. Are we on Wednesday?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So this is it. I'm sat here thinking, is it Sunday?
No, I start work next week.
Right. So on Sunday, I'm hoping to have a hive autopsy course PowerPoint done, and I have got one about different hive designs coming up and historical things of note about beekeeping. But they won't necessarily be back to back, but the autopsy one I think should be quite interesting. Yes, Sue.
I just wanted to say thank you as well, because I'm 6 months into my course. We've missed a few weeks because of COVID. But I can't tell you how much I've learned just on these 2 sessions, and thank you from the bottom of my heart, Carol. And when I know where you live, I'm going to be casually driving.
You're going to what, sorry?
Once I find out where you live, I'm going to be casually sort of walking past and going, "Oh, hi, is that where you live?"
Well, you've already said about
Stalking.
being a hairdresser, desperately in need of a haircut. I spoke to my little sister on, what's it called, Facebook today, and the first thing she said was, "Oh my God, you've gone grey." And so I pointed out it needs brushing forward. It's because it's tied back because it needs cutting. And when it's all forward, I actually look like I'm 20 years younger because my hair's dark. But when it's all straight back, I am so grey. But it's that.
Gotta go to the hair dryers again, Mike.
Yeah, we don't want to get into that one. But I've got to say, Sue, don't worry about the courses so much. Because I was due to go onto the courses back in May and they got cancelled. And in fact, I was due to go on them the year before. They all got cancelled, and I ended up just with 2 colonies and Diane helping us through these weekly or twice a week courses and the local association things. And the support's been amazing, and I've never once felt like I've been overwhelmed by what I was looking at. And I'd imagine Lorraine and Katie and Steve and some of the other people who've been on this with us through this journey this last 6 months would probably say the same. It's like, this is a little community, so never feel overwhelmed. Just kind of say what you see. It's a bit like catchphrase. say what you see, and somebody will help, because Diana's been amazing. And other people have been so supportive. It's been amazing. It's been a fabulous little community.
It has.
It's been nice to watch it grow as well, right from the start. So,
I mean, there's been Paul, there's been Alan. Alan's gone off to some other part
Alan,
of the world,
I spoke to Alan this week actually, and he showed me a picture. He hadn't had a shave for a while, so he had his big sort of thick navy jumper on, as he calls it, and he looked like he should be on a boat. And then his friend did some screen grabs of him while he was having a shave, and there's one with a moustache, and I was laughing my head off at that. It was so funny. But he shaved it all off, and he's clean shaven now.
But it's a fabulous community, and Sue, don't feel scared at all just by having 6 months worth of courses, because a lot of us didn't even manage to get that much. And
I'm so confident, and now I know that Diane wants her hair coloured. That's my special. So we're going to do a trade out with Diane.
We might do, yeah. It needs a cut before it needs colouring.
UK colour educator, so there you go, darling.
If you see anything when you get your bees, all you've got to do is shout, and somebody will kind of say, "Oh no, that looks bad. You need to do this. You need to do that."
If you sent me a photo of your hives, then I will probably say, "Can I use that in a talk?" And I won't say whose hive it is if you don't want me to. Which is where I've scrounged these autopsy pictures from. You've seen people say, "Oh, my hive's died," and I've only got one picture of bees that have died in a hive. So it's like, oh, how cheeky am I? I'm really cheeky. I'll invite you to my talk if you.
That's how everybody
learns. So
it absolutely is, Sue.
Of course.
Yeah, and to a large extent, the bees look after themselves. I mean, you might lose a swarm, but the chances are, if you're half diligent, you're not going to do that, and you might catch them. The chances of getting American foul brood, not high. You know, if you feed your bees in the winter, they will probably get through.
Yeah.
They do what they want.
You've got a bull in the garden that's going to go crashing through all the gardens and kill somebody's son.
The thing about foul brood is absolutely right. Most beekeepers will never ever see it in real life, and you will only see it as a bee health day. And despite it being a really sad event when you get foul brood in your apiary, I treated it personally as a learning experience and got a really good look at these frames because they're fresh, and unlike the stuff that's been kept for a while. But the thing, but we know where it came from, and we know exactly which bit of the country it came from before it was transported to Manchester and given to this guy. And it's just one of those things. We'll say don't use secondhand comb, and the other thing is when you get your bees, get them from someone you know and trust, rather than a very kind, albeit well-meaning stranger on the internet who donated a hive after an arson. It was bad luck on bad luck. It was just really crap. But you know, you have your bee disease insurance, and all your hives are covered. And then if you do end up with it, because you've learnt a bit about it, you'll recognise it early. It'll get destroyed, and then that's the end of it in that area. There's none anywhere else in this area because we know it was this one hive.
Dorothy.
Come down. Go on, do you want something, Katie? Is your sound
honey.
Sorry, I was telling the dog off.
Oh, right, okay.
Sorry, I thought I was muted.
There's quite a lot to be learned as well, isn't there? Like, your theory's been excellent, and I was lucky enough I'd done a course and had ordered my bees and got my bees and then didn't have the chance to be mentored. Like, I thought I would be going alongside quite an experienced mentor, you know, and just watching them handle the bees, and I would just naturally learn how to handle mine. And that of course didn't happen last year. But like having Diane and like there's a few other groups, but some are maybe a little bit more show, I don't know, a bit more show-offy or something. There's sometimes not a very nice vibe about beekeepers. They want to
right, I will edit the very end of